So good evening. Here we are. It's just in the dwindling moments here of Rosh Chodesh Sivan, and about to start tomorrow. Tomorrow's an interesting day in the Jewish calendar. Anybody know what it's called?
First of Sivan?
What? It's called the second of Sivan. It's also called Yom HaMiyuchas, the day with Yichus.
Why?
Okay, and the different explanations. Why is it a day of Yichus? So, one explanation is one significant thing that did happen that day is they said Nasa v'Nishma on that day. If you look in the Torah, it says that they got to the Har Sinai on Rosh Chodesh, and then Vayichad Sham Yisrael Neged Har, they camped as one in the single, right? And then the next day Moshe went up, and he got a short introductory message, which I won't go into here, but basically that I brought you on eagle's wings here, and now you're going to be Mamlechet Kohanim V'Goy Kadosh, a kingdom of priests and a holy nation, and they accepted Nasa v'Nishma. So that's one reason. The other reason they say is because it's like Yichus. What's Yichus?
Being secluded together.
That's Yichud.
Oh, Yichus. Oh.
Yichus, when you say somebody has Yichus,
Yeah.
they're related to somebody.
Relatives.
They're somebody's relative.
Yes.
Because this is the one day between Rosh Chodesh and starting Friday is the Shloshet Yimei Hagbalah, the third 3 days of connection. So there's really nothing at all interesting about it, but it has Yichus because it's standing next to the other ones. So some say that's why it's called Yom HaMiyuchas. I don't know. But be that as it may, it is interesting that we are about to read Parshat Bamidbar and start the book of Bamidbar, read Parshat Bamidbar, and virtually without exception, except in extremely rare circumstances. I apologize, I'm still not myself at all.
You want a cup of tea?
Exactly.
We have. Okay.
That in almost every year, Parshat Bamidbar is the Shabbos before Shavuot. And the question might be, why? We all certainly are aware of the whole Nesivos Shalom process, etc., that we've been preparing for Kabbalas Torah, and surely no accident that Parshat Bamidbar is going to be the introduction, right? That brings us finally in and ushers us into Shavuot. If you look at Parshat Bamidbar, I don't know if you want to offer an opinion, but what's it about basically? Anybody know? Is it a very fancy parsha with all sorts of stirring narratives?
Wandering our wanders
And where we stopped and where we camped.
A bunch of numbers, basically.
Why they call it numbers in English.
Brings down all the Nesim, then it brings down the various tribes and each number, and how many they had in this tribe and that tribe, and where this tribe camped and that tribe camped. The wife arrives.
The one next door was the last one.
And it's a bunch of numbers. And then again, the numbers together, and how many to have this. And then at the end of the parsha begins counting the Leviim, who are not counted amongst the other ones. Okay, very nice. So one could wonder, Bichlal, why the Torah is so interested in presenting all these statistics, where and all the details and all the specific, etc. And why, of course, is that before Shavuot? Those are all interesting questions. We're going to try to keep it short tonight, so I won't go into all of that. But one certain idea of why it's always the parsha before Shavuot is it begins with the words that they naso et rosh b'nei Yisrael. That was supposed to be counting their, but it doesn't say to count them, it says to raise their heads. Each one, legugel osam, each one is supposed to come and be raised up. And there's a beautiful chazal which talks about how it wasn't just like they sent out some clerks from the Census Bureau to go count, but each family appeared in front of Moshe and Aaron and each one was saying, I'm so-and-so, and this is my son, and this is my daughter, and this, etc. Each one was given a little bit of prominence. Each one was given chashivus, and that raised them up. Wasn't so you're not just a number. You're not just one of the mixed multitude and wretched refuse, whatever, of our citizenry. But that's very important before Kabbalah Satorah. Before
What did happen to the Erev Rav?
What?
Did the Erev Rav also?
No, the Erev Rav weren't counted amongst us. They were there, but we're only counting here B'nai Israel. So, and that's an important idea before Shavuos, before Kabbalah Satorah, to know each person that needs to know that they count, they matter. It's important if they're there. It's important that they take part in the nation, etc. And that's a crucial aspect of it. There's a very idea, and the Ramban goes on to other things, also that they should see how they've developed from this tiny group of 70 souls that went down to Mitzrayim, and now they came out, and now there's this nation. You know how many people there were there, approximately?
600,000.
There was 600,000 men, not counting Shevet Levi, from the ages of 20 to 50.
60.
What is it,
That's
3
an
million?
amazing,
What?
60.
50.
it's an amazing group of
Just
Maybe
the
60. What?
ages in which they're eligible to serve in the base of Mikdash?
What?
Is that they
Well,
age range for
one of the
serving?
things is call on Sheit Savat. That's some of them. Some of them are Farshim, particularly those are the more rationalist ones. Say it was important to count them. And the question is, after all, they were counted pretty recently. But when they gave the shkalim for the Mishkan, they also count. So they knew pretty much how many people there were. Why count again now? Another question again. But now the Rashbam and others say they're about. The plan was they're going to go to Sinai, get the Torah, and then boom. A couple of weeks will be in Eretz Yisrael. They're going to start conquering, right? So they get to ready, get the army ready, so to speak. They to know how many people they are. So particularly the military age was important. But if you add that group to the children, a lot of kids, right? A lot of women were having 6 in one
What is it,
One shot.
3 million?
and the elderly, and the women, of course. Talking at least 3 million, right? And that's not even talking about an interesting sideline that they say only 1/5 of Am Yisrael came out of Mitzrayim. So enormous number.
That's an astounding number of people.
Yeah. So that's another reason that they were counted. Okay. So all those are important ideas before Shavuos, and mainly for us that we know that we shouldn't just think of ourselves as each person counts, each person, and then etc. And that a big part of what's going on there is that in the Torah view of things, we're not individuals serving Hashem. We're a nation serving Hashem. We have to value the fact that each of us has our own thing to contribute. Each of us has our own aspect, and it's only by appreciating what we have and what the other ones have that we can all do it together. It's said very beautifully in the davening every morning. It says, "B'chulam mekablim alehem ol malchus shamayim zeh mizeh, v'nosnim reshus zeh lazeh." All of them accept malchus shamayim, accept the kingdom of heaven, one from the other. They give each other permission, l'hakdish liyotzram, to sanctify God together. Because it's only when I value what you do and you value what I do, and each of us together have something to contribute. That's a big part of it also.
Both
Okay.
as individuals and as a nation.
Yeah. Okay. So those are some nice ideas. But I thought just in the short time we have, there's a very nice essay here by in Nesivos Shalom by Slonimer Rebbe, in which I thought that he has commenting on a midrash that may be nice to skim through together at least. Don't mind hand that to. No, we're not going to read one. Just skim a little bit here and there. Okay? He comments on, before we get into it, his main comment is on the fact that the Torah was given in the desert. Right? And that's an important aspect also of why Bamidbar. It has to be in the desert. Well, before we see what he has to say, what do you think? Why would that be an important place to be the Torah? It's not obvious. Maybe they should have waited till they got to Yerushalayim. Maybe they should have, what?
It's accessible to everybody.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's accessible.
Maybe you have to go out from yourself to accept the...
To go out. To go out. That's one of the things that people often say, that to accept the Torah properly, you have to do so without all your prejudices and your preconditions and your custom ways of thinking. Or, it's in the wilderness. There's none of that. There's only
less distractions out there.
Right.
It's just in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
No.
That's not. That's true, but I'm saying in terms of your mind, when we want to, a lot of the time when people want to take on learning Torah, observing Torah, thinking about Torah, they all filter it through. Well, I like this, I don't like that. This fits in with my preconceived values. That offends me, whatever. That's not the way to accept Torah. The Torah you have to accept it on its own. It is what it is, and it isn't. It's Hashem's word. It's our, as I think I quote Reb Hirsch very often. He says that the Torah is not religion. What does he mean by that?
It's not religion.
Not religion. Why is Torah not religion? He says that all the various religions have one thing in common. There were various attempts for mankind to relate to God. And to come up with ways in which we can serve God. This way, that way, the other way, whatever. Torah is not that. Torah is not mankind coming up with how to serve God. The Torah is God coming to man and saying, "This is how I want you to serve me." It started with him.
It's a different word than religion.
Yeah.
To invent a new word, there isn't anything.
I don't know what word you want to call it.
Top-down approach.
Right.
Right.
It stands on its own. Obviously, of course, Hashem wants and expects that we also invest it with some of our own feelings and personalize it to some extent, and obviously, but the source of it, the essential validity, the essential authority of it is not from us; it's from Him. And the Midbar says, we have to accept it on its own terms. Okay, so that's one very major idea of the Midbar, and it has to be, in the way in which we. And also without like you said before, without our prejudice, etc. Okay.
So it's open to all people,
Open to all. Okay.
not specifically one country.
So here in this essay, however, the Slonimer Rebbe takes it a step further, and he starts with a midrash there. You see, there's 2 pages. One that has HaTorah Nitna Bamidbar in the middle of the page. It says, "Vayidaber Hashem Moshe B'Midbar Sinai." That's how it starts. B'Medrash, Torah Chazal. In the Medrash, our sages said, "Lama Midbar." Why a Midbar? Mikan Shanu Chachamim. From here, the rabbis taught, "Begimel Dvarim Nitna HaTorah." We find that the Torah was given with 3 elements: Eish, Mayim, and Midbar. We find that the Torah is fire. In fact, figures in pretty strongly. So fire burning on top of Sinai, etc. Mayim, a lot of talk about water, and Midbar. How do we know? It says it brings a pasuk for the Eish, the Mayim, Midbar, etc. Okay, Davar Acher, and then at the end of that paragraph, the last line, he says what we kind of just said: Misha Eno Ose Atzmo Kamidbar Hefker. If a person doesn't make themselves like a midbar, which is hefker is ownerless, without preconditions, he's not able to acquire the Torah, and therefore it says midbar. Okay, so in this essay here, and again I'm not going to read through it so much, but try to sort of skim it a little bit and refer to it. He talks about these 3 elements and how these 3 elements are important. They're all sort of, the midbar is obviously a desert element. The fire and water are kind of wilderness kinds of things too. And whether or not a Nachal Kibbutzim. And why are these elements important when we're trying to bring the Torah into ourselves? Okay? See, he starts in an interesting way. He says that at first glance, if you think about fire, is that a destructive or a constructive element?
You think of destructive.
Mostly you think of it as a destructive, something that burns stuff.
And,
Obviously, it
Cooking.
could be used for energy and cooking and
Purification.
vision,
heating and
seeing in
whatever,
the dark.
right?
Right.
But its basic nature is to burn. Right? What about water? Water is nourishing, but it's often referred to as sort of a stultifying, filling, drowning, putting down.
But
But puts out the fire, yeah.
What?
Puts out the fire.
Yeah. And the Midbar obviously can be a place of devastation and thirst and starvation. Aren't normal. It isn't, as they would say in Israel, lo muvan me'elav. Israelis love to say, not self-understood, that these would be the three things that you would look to
For granted.
for inspiration for Torah. Right? So,
Destructive, right? Nothing destructive is so dangerous.
Right. Can be.
but he says, nevertheless, that's what the Midrash says, and let's see how it is. He says, because all of them have, in fact, an aspect to it which could be destructive, but also have an aspect which could be constructive, and it's our task to take the constructive. The Eish is, after all, is the famous yeshiva in Israel, in Jerusalem,
Right.
Eish Torah. What Eish Torah? What is that? And so there's psukim that say that the Torah is like an Eish, like a fire. What type of fire? If you've done properly, especially if you're Hasidic again, there's passion. Not true. There's not. They also have a fiery approach, just a different type of fiery approach towards Torah. It's not as much emotion or whatever. But Eish Torah, and that, in fact, not only can it inspire you and give you passion, but it also can help you. Sorefes es hatuma v'hatavos. If you have various lusts, you have various things that draw you down, various things that all of us know too well today, how with all the distractions of the world, all the various things that take us away. How do we get excited about it? How do we get passionate about our Judaism, about Torah? There has to be some passion. I mean, that's one of the things they talk about most, I think, with the kids at risk, is that they're just not turned on. They see all these other things that seem to be interesting, exciting,
A lot of
fascinating.
competition.
You know, I had a Rebbe once who said that his main competitor is not some philosophy. It's Jay Leno at the top. It's getting excited about all sorts of other things.
Mundane stuff.
So it's important to use our Eish to try to get fire into and inject passion into our Avodas Hashem. That's one. What about water? Water, on the one hand, like I said, it can sort of fill you up and make you bloated, but it also it's sustenance, a source of life. He says, Koach, there are sometimes negative things, but tafkido is again to want to draw yourself to water, like the person is drawn to water. In fact, there's a lot of quotes in Sefer Tehillim which talk about like Ayal Tav Ogal Afike Mayim, like the what's an Ayal?
Stream, river.
A deer.
What?
Yeah.
Not a deer. It's one of those.
Gazelle? Gazelle.
A gazelle, maybe. It stands there by the water, pushing, and it says, "I am thirsty for you, God, and I'm looking for you to get, some I'm not." Those types of things. Okay, and he quotes an interesting Rambam here. He says in the third line in the second column, "Behishtokakus Lashem Yisporach Kalashim," with a desire, with a great deep desire for Hashem, as the Rambam says in Hilchos Tshuva, "Avas Hashem tzricha liyot kecholeh cholei ahava." A person who's truly getting it is like a person who's lovesick. And the Rambam goes into a very beautiful, he doesn't quote the whole thing here, a description about how a person in love can only think about their beloved and dream about them and want to please them and want to spend as much time with them as they can, etc. Right? Think about it all the time. As he says, and what's that about? That's part of also making the midbar. I'm nothing. Without you, I'm nothing. I'm all here just to be together with you. And the bad side is a place that's hefker, is a dangerous place. When it's a wilderness, when it's and we all know people necessarily who behave at home, but when they go into the wilderness and they go into other places, they lose a lot of their inhibitions. Do all sorts of things. I know Lonnie and I were on a cruise once, so they kept trying to get all the participants to get involved with all these crazy activities. And the line they kept saying again and again was, "You ain't never going to see none of these people ever again." So just let it all hang out. So that's a hefker kind of place where you have no responsibility, doesn't mean anything.
Sorry, I thought we were talking about water.
No, we're kind of switching into the mid, but it's kind of related, right? And it has beli gedorim and siyagim. It has no place to hold a person back. Okay. However, the alav lachnis mimida zu b'kedusha, but you should use the hefker aspect to lose all your inhibitions, but to make your own desires hefker. You just want to accept what Hashem wants. So that's Eish, Mayim, and Midbar. Okay. And those are important for Chacham and Kabbalah Torah.
Disown your desires.
Those desires that you have, I guess the ones that are inimical to Torah values, you have to let those go. Let those go. Well, open yourself. I heard something once. I don't know. There's these different sayings I hear people saying, "Let go and let God," or something.
Yeah.
To let Him drive the bus.
Not bad advice sometimes.
What?
Not bad advice. Sometimes you can hope it
Yeah.
can be a bad thing. So it's kind of,
Yeah.
things we're not in charge of.
Okay. So that's the first part. Then he goes a little deeper. He brings down, there's a Mishnah which we're going to say in Pirkei Avot this week, in the last parak. It says, Kach hitarka shel Torah. What's the way of Torah? Pas b'melech tochal, bread and salt, mayim b'masor tishta, water through a strainer, al aretz tishan, sleep on the ground, chayet sar tichya, live a life of deprivation, u'v'torah ata amel, and you work in the Torah, good for you in this world, good for you in the next world. Okay. That sounds very nice.
Does anyone do that?
So question one, does anybody do that? Some people do that. But is that really the recommended practice? Is that really what we advocate? People should sleep on the ground and only eat bread and salt? No chalent, no kulul, no beds, no etc.? What does that Mishnah really mean?
If you have too austere, people wouldn't be able to do it today.
Certainly in our generation.
Even if it comes to that, you should still do
Okay,
it.
so that's one. If that's the only way you can do it, be prepared to do it. Okay, that's one way of looking at it. A little slightly different way is you can do it. You can engage in the other things, but they're not important. They're not the ikr. They're only. You have to, so to speak, buy off your Yetzer Hara a little bit, but not really, and essentially they're not important. I mean, great tzaddikim, certainly were able to be kind of like one famous example was the Rebbe of Rizhin. Rizhin. Rebbe Yisrael of Rizhin. He lived in I don't know Galicia, I think. I'm not sure where Rizhin was. I think Galicia, and some different Hasidic courts had their way. His Hasidic court was like he lived in a palace. And we don't know what that means. Probably this palace is probably nicer than his, but compared to the shacks that most of the Jews lived in. It was a beautiful place, and it was gold and silver. And people came in; they were very impressed. Right? He was dressed in finery, and he had golden shoes, and etc. And one day he was walking with Chassidim out in the snow towards shul, and then somebody was walking behind. They noticed this red on the floor, and then, long story short, he wasn't wearing soles on the shoes. On top he had a gold shoe, but underneath was nothing. And when you went into his palace and you went behind the gold door to his bedroom, there was a simple cot with nothing.
Really?
He felt that it was important for those Jews to feel they're part of something grand and special, and feel proud of their, etc. So it was a show.
Interesting.
But inside, it didn't mean it. It was a complete ascetic. Okay, so that's tzaddik and that,
You live both extremes.
Right.
Wow.
The-
Complete ascetic is because he didn't, deliberately, or
Yeah,
He didn't enjoy any of it.
deliberately didn't have soles on his shoes?
he didn't want to. He wanted to live this Mishnah, but he wanted the people to be inspired. He didn't want. He wanted them to think they have a schleppy Rebbe. I mean, a lot of the Rebbes wear.
Living too.
Yeah.
Sometimes my Rebbe wears these unbelievably beautiful necklaces and
Who's your Rebbe?
Rebbe Tversky.
Well, yes. We was on discuss it once. My brother-in-law was a Talmud kid also when he was in Milwaukee, and so he went to Milwaukee for something, and he left. I had my brother-in-law's. I don't know what he wears a Bekish, and he left it home. He borrowed Rabbi Tversky's bag. He wears his Bekish. That shop is like, okay.
They're amazing.
That's
But okay.
very cool.
But that's basically, so you should feel you're part of something larger. But essentially, then what's really important though is understanding these things. But he goes in us on a level of level. Right? So he says Hamashmos B'zeh, the top of the next page. What they're supposed to mean is Sharak al Yidei Shemevatel Kol Yeshuso V'Chumroso Az Yichol L'Kabel HaTorah Shetishkon B'Torah. That really, even if you have those things, but you have to make them that they're not important. They're not important. That what's important, they're just material things are not important. And only through that can you really be zochet to get the Torah. He says, Mikol Ma'amarei Chazal olet tmuna klalit. If we look at many of the sages' writings, we can come up with a general picture. Shekol od yeshno ba'adam shilton hachomer eno yechol leknos Torah. As long as a person is ruled by the materialistic desires and values, you can't really get Torah. It doesn't work. They don't go together. Oil and water. As Chazal say, Ein divrei Torah miskaimin ela b'mi shemei misatz maliyah. The Torah can only really exist with somebody who's willing to kill themselves for it. Now, of course, each of these sentences are easy to read and harsh, and they're hard to read in context. And what is that supposed to mean? You're supposed to kill you. You're not supposed to kill yourself, obviously. But it means to the extent to which what's the essential important things in my life. Mm-hmm. And it comes out, I would say, and he goes through a whole list over here, and I don't have to read it, but etc. When you feel that you must be comfortable, and it's only after you had this pleasure, and it's only after you engaged in that, and you took care of this thing. Yeah, that if a person is going to do all those things, it ain't going to work. I heard it once expressed that some people want to know Shas, but they want to learn the whole thing in 2 nights while sleeping through half the night. It doesn't work that way. A person has to put in the time, put in the effort, and understand that there are going to be choices. Of course, I'm certainly a Torah Derech Eretz person, and a person who feels that it's important to engage in the world and be involved with the world, and as much as the world has to offer, they can enhance and enrich our spiritual experience, etc. But, having said that, you have to know that there are choices, and if you're going to, I'm just talking to myself, if I'm going to sit there like I well too often do, doom scrolling on my phone, and looking at Facebook, and looking at this and that those are hours I'm not only not learning during those hours, I'm just taking myself away from the right mindfulness, right? And the mindset of a person who's serious about what am I really supposed to be doing for my life is building my relationship with the Kodesh Baruch Hu, with my relationship with Torah, with building with my future, with eternity, and I just allow myself, unfortunately, just to fritter away all that time. And it's you have to be willing to kill those things, so to speak. I think it means just to kill those desires, kill those constant, very aggressive hers that we all encounter all the time, which would take us away from our spiritual lives. We have to and put those passions of the Aish, of the fire of Torah into us. We have to be willing to make ourselves quiet from all those other things that are pulling at us, and have a midbar, and to make sure that we take ourselves out, put ourselves in the midbar. In a way, going to the Beis Medrash is a bit of a midbar. It's easy to sit at home in your comfortable chair and, I'm going to learn on my easy chair, this, after I finish checking my messages, and I do this and that, have enough snacks and whatever. And, it's important to go and to a place, etc., where you are putting in the effort, right? And he says in the middle here, "V'habir b'zeh," the reason is bishum shahatorah v'hachomer him tarti desasri. Torah and materialistic values are contradictions. Ein haTorah yichola shetishkon beguf hachomri ad shemezachech et atzmo. Just a simple, unrefined human body is not a place really where the Torah can come. The Torah, you have to develop a filter. You have to develop a place. You have to make place for the Torah to be able to come in and raise one up. I might think that it's a good thing to have Torah. That's what they tell you at the Shabbatons. It's Kishmak, you have Cholent, Kugel, all the good things, right? They have all the Torah. And Harchava, that when you feel great about yourself, that's when you're going to get Torah. And there is something to that, certainly, to attract people from the outside, but that's, so to speak, the early qualifying round.
It's the gift wrap.
Yeah, but a person is going to get serious about really becoming a Ben Torah, a Bas Torah. You have to know that it has to go beyond that. Kimocho yehe panu yoter le'tamek, to make your mind free in order to be able to deepen in Torah, because it's not like other chachmas. And he brings down a very interesting, famous quote. He often quotes this quote. The Baal Shem Tov says, there's a pasuk that says, "Anochi ha'omed beini uveneichem." I forget where that pasuk is. I am standing. I think Moshe said just before Moshe's second recitation of the Seres HaDibros and V'eschanan. I think that's where that pasuk is. That says, "Anochi omed," that I stood between you and God, so to speak, and I help give you the Torah. That's the simple meaning of that pasuk. But the Baal Shem Tov took that as Anochi omed bein Hashem v'neichem. Anochi stands between me and you. What does that mean? Anochi is ego. Ego. Is that right? Ego. Anochiyut. Anochiyut is narcissism. It's a person's full of themselves. That's a mechitza ha'omedes. It's like a mechitza. It's a barrier that mafsika ben Yehudi LaKadosh Baruch Hu separates between a Jew and Hashem. Sha'av sha'osek b'Torah. Very interesting. Even if a person is busy with Torah and avodah, but kiven sheshakua b'yeshutu ve'enochius, if they're at the same time also busy with their own ego and their personal needs, hareza mechitza mafsekes. It acts as a barrier. As the Rebbe said, shekol hanos olam hazeh afilu shel heter. Even all the pleasures of this world, even permissible ones. I'm talking about forbidden pleasures, permissible pleasures, but they still get in the way. They get in the way to the extent that they have important. Again, I mean, you could read this to say it's just completely recommending a totally ascetic lifestyle, but I don't think that's what he said. It's just in terms of their importance, in terms of their inherent value. Sure, it's great to have a good Shabbos meal. Sure, it's good to have pleasure in your avodas Hashem. It should be that way. but it has to be understood that it shouldn't be about my ego and about my personal, certainly physical, material pleasures. And he says that's why there are these three things in the last chapter. Kocha Eish, fire, because the Eish Kedusha, it burns up all these materialistic things. And if you bring enough heavenly fire, a passionate fire, then that brings chukka. The last two lines. Then there's ava. Ava is often compared to water, right? Because it comes and it lessens it. Misaber. How do you say that? It's not mishaber. I think it ameliorates. I don't know the power of the chomer. And if a person places themselves like a midbar, which is like you said before, taking away all these things, then and is willing to put their own things on the side, that's so important. And he says if you look at the 48 ways of the famous 48 ways in that parak, almost all of them are about those kinds of things. Putting yourself behind, caring about others, thinking about this, thinking about listening, hearing, etc. Putting aside our typical personal preoccupation with ourselves and allowing ourselves to be animated by and filled with Torah. We're able to do that. We're able to able to reduce our own chumrius, our own physicality, or those things. I don't know physicality. Those kinds of things I was describing, where we have all these needs that we get ourselves into, which take away so much of our time and energy and sap our spiritual potential. And if a person is able to do that and move more into the midbar frame of mind, that's the way to receive the Torah.
Sure.